In April 1992, a young plastic surgeon in Milan walked out of his clinic and quit. He was 28. He had a medical degree, a steady career, the kind of life Italian parents brag about at dinner. He gave it all up. Years later, he tried to explain why. He told an art gallery owner that the whole job had started to feel fake to him, like he was just exploiting people's vanity. He couldn't do it anymore. That guy is now worth around $89 billion. He's the richest man in Italy. Forbes ranks him somewhere around 21st in the world. And here's the strange part. You probably have no idea who he is. His name is Giancarlo Devasini. He co-founded a company called Tether. If you've never heard of it, that's fine, but you should know that Tether runs the biggest stablecoin in crypto. Over $184 billion worth of these digital tokens are floating around the world right now, used by more than 500 million people. Devasini owns somewhere between 45 and 47% of the company that prints them. And he's basically a ghost. No public social media, no real interviews. Maybe 10 clear photos of him exist online. When a journalist asked to interview him for a book about crypto, Devasini reportedly answered with this. He said, "Bees don't waste their time explaining things to flies." That was the whole reply. So how does someone go from being a Milan plastic surgeon to one of the richest and most secretive men alive? It's a weird story, and most of it almost nobody talks about. He was born in Turin, April 30th, 1964. Smart kid, good schools, ended up at the University of Milan Medical School. Graduated in 1990, picked plastic surgery. 2 years later, he was done with it. What he did instead is the part most articles skip over. He started importing computer parts from Asia into Italy, China, Hong Kong, Taiwan. The electronics business in 90s Italy was a bit of a wild west. Cheap imports, gray markets, lots of corners you could cut if you wanted to. He founded a company called Point G in 1992 and went to work. In 1996, Microsoft caught him distributing pirated software and made him pay a fine. About a decade after that, Toshiba sued one of his other companies over DVD patents. None of this killed him though. By the mid-2000s, he was running a small empire of Italian electronics companies. His official biography would later claim it pulled in over 100 million euros a year. The Financial Times went and checked the actual filings. The real number was around 12 million. Then in February 2008, his warehouse burned down. The whole operation went into liquidation. He was 43 and starting from zero again. For the next 4 years, he tried everything. IT companies, e-commerce, organic food delivery, real estate. Nothing really stuck. Around this time, he started using a name online, Merlin. His Skype handle was Merlin Magoo. He was a 40-something failed Italian businessman quietly hanging around a corner of the internet that almost nobody understood yet. Bitcoin. In early 2012, on a Bitcoin forum, a user posting as Merlin offered to sell DVDs for 1/100th of a Bitcoin each. That was him. Around the same time, a French guy named Raphael Nicole was building a small Bitcoin exchange called Bitfinex. Devasini and Nicole met. Devasini joined the company as an investor and as the chief financial officer. That was the official title anyway. The Financial Times later quoted industry executives who said something different. They said Devasini was the one actually running things. In a private chat room in 2016, Devasini said it himself out loud. He said, "At the end, I'm the guy that calls the shots in Bitfinex." 2 years after Bitfinex started in 2014, a second project came along, originally called RealCoin. The idea was simple and honestly kind of brilliant. Build a cryptocurrency that's always worth exactly $1 because every coin is supposedly backed by a real dollar, sitting in a real bank account. They renamed it Tether. Devasini, working with a Bitfinex executive named Phil Potter, set up the parent company in the British Virgin Islands. By 2015, the original founders had sold out to Devasini and Potter. From that point on, Devasini was the largest shareholder of what would eventually become one of the most important companies in the entire crypto industry. For years, it was a quiet little side project, a weird coin used by traders to move money between exchanges. Then crypto blew up and Tether blew up with it, but the bigger it got, the louder the questions got. The whole pitch was that every Tether was backed by a real dollar in a real bank. So which bank? Where's the audit? Show us the receipts. For years, the company refused. And then 2018 happened. Bitfinex was using a Panamanian payment processor called Crypto Capital to handle its money. Roughly $850 million of customer funds were sitting with Crypto Capital when authorities in Poland, Portugal, and the United States froze the accounts. Suddenly, Bitfinex had a massive hole in its books and no easy way to plug it. Court filings later released by the New York Attorney General showed that someone using the alias Merlin sent a panicked message to crypto capital. The message said this could be extremely dangerous for the entire crypto community. Bitcoin could crash to below $1,000 if they didn't move fast. That message came from Devasini. What he did next is wild. On November 5th, 2018, he authorized a $900 million loan from Tether's reserves to Bitfinex. Then, as a Bitfinex executive, he signed the receipt for that same loan. He was on both sides of the transaction. He was lending the money meant to back Tether's customers to a sister company that had lost its money. The New York Attorney General spent 2 years investigating. In February 2021, she dropped the hammer. Tether and Bitfinex paid $18.5 million and got banned from operating in New York. The Attorney General said, in plain English, that Tether's claim of being fully backed by dollars at all times was a lie. 8 months later, the U.S. Commodity Futures Trading Commission added another $41 million in fines. They had pulled the actual data and found that during a 26-month period, Tether only had enough dollar reserves to back its tokens about 27% of the time. You'd think this would have killed the company. Instead, the opposite happened. Demand for Tether kept growing. Today, there are over 184 billion of these tokens out there. The company sits on roughly $135 billion worth of US Treasury bonds. In 2024, it reportedly made over $13 billion in profit. That's more than Goldman Sachs made the same year, with a fraction of the staff. So what does the man at the center of all this actually do with his life? For most of the last decade, he ran a multi-billion-dollar business out of a small office above a sports bar in Lugano, Switzerland. Not a glass tower in Manhattan, a sports bar in a quiet Swiss town. In 2022, Tether signed a deal with the city of Lugano called Plan B, where citizens can now pay their taxes and fines using Bitcoin or Tether. Local politicians have been arguing about it ever since. In the Bahamas, he bought a house near the chairman of the bank that holds most of Tether's reserves. The two of them discovered their families came from the same village in Italy and started calling each other cousin. They reportedly bought a beachfront lot together and split it down the middle. In January 2025, Tether announced it was moving its headquarters to El Salvador, the country that made Bitcoin legal tender. Devasini and his partner, an Italian artist named Valentina Picazzi, reportedly bought a home in San Salvador. Picazzi is the woman who made the Satoshi Nakamoto statue that sits on the lakefront in Lugano. That's romantic in a very specific way. And honestly, that's about everything anyone has confirmed. No verified yacht, no confirmed art collection, no car collection that journalists have been able to document. The man is worth $89 billion, and we know maybe 10 things about his personal life. The only really personal detail the Financial Times could find was the quote on his WhatsApp profile. It says, "Life has no backspace." In March 2025, things shifted. Devasini moved up from chief financial officer to chairman of the entire company. Tether brought in a new CFO whose main job was to finally get Tether through a real independent audit. A year later, in March 2026, the company confirmed it had hired KPMG to do exactly that. After more than 10 years of refusing to open its books, Tether is finally being forced to. The reason is straightforward. In July 2025, President Trump signed something called the Genius Act, which requires every major stablecoin company to be audited every year. Tether didn't really have a choice. The era of the secret crypto giant is ending whether Devasini likes it or not. Then, in September 2025, Bloomberg reported something that made everyone in finance sit up straight. Tether was apparently in talks with SoftBank and ARK Invest to raise $15 to $20 billion. At a valuation of $500 billion. If that deal closes, Devasini's stake would be worth somewhere around $224 billion. That would put him in the top 5 wealthiest people on the planet, above Mark Zuckerberg, probably above Bill Gates, maybe above Jeff Bezos. But maybe the most Italian moment of his entire story came in December 2025. Devasini is reportedly a lifelong Juventus fan. Juventus is the football club from his hometown of Turin, so he used Tether to make a serious offer. 1.1 billion euros, all cash, for the controlling stake in Juventus, which is owned by the Agnelli family. If the Agnelli name doesn't ring a bell, they own Ferrari, they control Stellantis, and they've basically run northern Italian industry for over 100 years. The current head of the family, John Elkann, rejected the offer within hours. His public response was simple. He said Juventus has been part of his family for 102 years. It's a perfect ending for a story like this. Old money against new money. The dynasty against the ghost. A family that has shaped Italy for a century, told no by a man who built a digital empire bigger than most countries. And almost nobody saw him coming. That's basically Devasini. He quit medicine because he thought it was a scam. He sold pirated software, watched his business burn down, hid behind a fake name on a forum, and ended up controlling one of the most powerful and controversial companies in the world. And his story isn't even finished. The audit is happening. The DOJ investigation Bloomberg reported on never officially went away. The $500 billion valuation hasn't closed yet, and the man at the center of it all still hasn't given a single real interview. Maybe he never will. Maybe that's the whole point. In a world where every billionaire is on Twitter trying to be the loudest voice in the room, Devasini figured out something different. He figured out that the most powerful position you can have is the one nobody is looking at. Everyone was watching Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg. Meanwhile, a former Italian plastic surgeon quietly built one of the most valuable companies on Earth, and almost nobody noticed.